Hi, I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Faculty Spotlight series with the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. We have with us today Aimee Barbeau, is an assistant professor at the Gies College, and she teaches Business 101. Which is the very first course that new students who are interested in business get exposed to. Each year, 800 to 1,000 undergraduates take this course. And it's the first time the doors open on the world of business. Aimee, welcome.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
Now, I know this generation tends to be highly skeptical of business and capitalism in general. Let's face it, the way business is portrayed in the movies, on TV, Succession, and other shows, um, obviously lead to the conclusion that business is dirty, business is for greedy people, business is for the sharp-elbowed among us, and who wants to be there? And now we have your great answer. Now,
Mhm.
Aimee, the other important part of what you teach is business ethics. And this is, I think it's a really important topic, and I think it does go a long way to alleviate concerns that there are no ethics in business. How do you teach business ethics to people who don't know a whole lot about business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and a lot of my students don't, right? They pick this major, but it's their first semester in college and they may never have had a business course before. So it is all new to them. So where I like to start is that all professions have specific purposes and they have a kind of sometimes explicit, but sometimes implicit code of ethics that goes with the purpose of that profession. So we talk about common examples, right? A doctor, right? They have right there in the healing practices, right? And their purpose is to right to do that. And that means in their code of ethics in the Hippocratic Oath, it's to do no harm, right? So that kind of fits with what they're trying to do. And then I ask students, and I say, okay, but what about like a soldier, someone in the military? What is their purpose? Okay, then we think about, right? They're like, okay, protect or defend, or right? They could make a list of things. Okay, so does their code of ethics look like the doctor's? Well, no. And they start to figure, okay, well, of course, the soldier probably does do some harm on some levels. They have to, but there is a code of ethics of like not harming non-combatants, right? And so we kind of start to kind of sketch this out. And I talked to them even about lawyers, right? Lawyers, we have a common thought that people should always tell the truth. But of course, what about confidentiality with a lawyer, right? They can't always really be forthright with the truth. So we kind of start fleshing this out. And then I say, okay, so what about business? And it follows on my last answer that we've sort of understood that what business does is it's a two-way exchange at its core that creates value for both parties.
Hmm.
Right. So if you and I are making an exchange, we don't engage in business unless we both benefit afterwards. So we call this positive sum transaction. Okay. So if that's what business is, then anything that violates or doesn't create that positive sum transaction, that's going to be a problem, right? That's where business goes wrong. That's where it becomes unethical. So what I'm trying to convince students of basically is that what we think of as ethics in business isn't something we slap on after the fact, right? Or at the end, like, oh, wait, we got to like find some rules here. No, it's actually intrinsic to what we're doing in business, right? Business needs to be voluntary. Both parties have to agree. There shouldn't be any fraud, right? If we're exchanging and I lie to you about what we're exchanging, then it doesn't create value, right? So once students think about, okay, this is what business is, that what this fundamental building block of trade, then they can start to easily identify, oh, right. Okay. Situations where parties aren't being honest or someone's being forced into a trade. Oh, okay. That's obvious. That's where business goes wrong, right? That's where it's violating that code of ethics. Again, I really want students to think of like ethics in business, not as this like extraneous list of do's and don'ts, but much more of like intrinsic to what we are trying to do in creating value for society. And thought about that way, even, my freshman students can immediately say, oh, right, of course. these are clearly things we shouldn't be doing because that violates like what trade actually is, and it's no longer creating value.
Right.
And that I find to be a really compelling way to like introduce it. And then they start to see that we do case studies and they're able to see, oh, right. They were violating that fundamental aspect of trade that it needs to be positive sum. And they're able to pick up on that pretty quickly.
Now, one of the things I really like about the way you teach Business 101 is the experiential learning you add in the last 8 weeks of the semester, where you pair student teams with companies on projects to improve social impact. And you had really great Microsoft, Deloitte, Caterpillar, Abbott Laboratories. What is that like, and what's the nature of a typical assignment?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Again, it's all, to help students think about the fact that these companies care all the time about their social impact, right? They're thinking about it. So the first step is to do some company research. And I think many students are really surprised to realize that these companies are thinking about the issues that they care about. They're thinking about sustainability. They're thinking about access and inclusion. They're thinking about the mental health of their employees. They're thinking about customers. They're doing a lot there already. And what students do is over the course of 8 weeks, they think about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and they use those as a lens to provide a suggestion to that company on how to improve its social impact. So it's really exciting. The last day of class, the companies send people in person to come to Champaign. They drive down oftentimes from Chicago to hear student presentations. And all the students get dressed up in business professional, and it's really amazing. And they get to give honestly their first business presentation for most all of the students. This is their first time doing that. So the professional skills piece is really important, but also kind of suggests to them like, hey, this is what you're currently doing, and this is where we think you could improve your social impact. And the companies find it really interesting because, of course, they want to hire our students. And what our students are able to give them is a little glimpse into, okay, what do the 18 to 20-year-olds, what do the next generation of the
Mm,
workforce, what do they want? What are they
right.
looking for in an employer? And so from the company side, they're just thrilled to hear that as well, right? Because they're like, oh, okay, these are the kinds of things that you care about, that you're interested in. So it's a really fascinating, fun project that for the students and I think the companies as well. It really underscores again how all of these companies are thinking in 1,000 ways about the impact that they're having on society and various stakeholders.
So I wonder how your course transforms the thinking of people who may come into it a little skeptical. I wonder how they go out. Do they go out still skeptical? Do they go out believers? Do they see that
Yeah.
there's another side of business? How do you see this transformation materialize in your class?
Yeah. So a unique aspect of my course is that I teach the course, but I teach it along with about 40 undergraduate section leaders that are part of delivering all of this. And so where I see a lot of what you're talking about is I have people who come after, like come to me after the course and they're like, this was so amazing. I love this so much. I want to be a section leader. Like I want to do this for the
Oh,
next generation.
right.
I want to help the next group come in and realize the power of business, the value of business, right? All of that stuff. So I definitely hear it from the section leaders saying this really revolutionized the way I was thinking about this. This is a really powerful way for them to come in. And of course, at Gies, we really think about business on purpose, right? And actually, one of the last classes of the semester, Larry Gies himself actually comes and
Oh,
talks
wow. The
about,
school's namesake and benefactor.
yes, and he comes in and talks about business on purpose. And having him come really underscores everything I've been telling them all semester long, right? Which is the kinds of decisions you make matter. Business adds tremendous value to society, right? All of those things I think are exemplified in his story. And he shares that with students as well. It's a really powerful moment.
I'm just going to say too, business schools are often named after people, but students rarely, if ever, see the person in person or are engaged with that person. It's like a ghost. But it's not true at Gies.
It is
Larry, I
not
know, is
true.
very involved, and I have sat in classes where he actually teaches, which is really remarkable. Now, Aimee, what about you? How did you come to do this in your life? I mean, what made you decide that this was going to be your life's purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I can say is that I knew at the age of 5 that I wanted to be a teacher. Like this is just like kind of built into my DNA. But what wasn't clear to me is what I was going to teach and how I was going to teach, what that was going to look like. So I actually tried a lot of different things. My undergraduate was in math and literature, and then I did a master's degree in history. And I was just kind of trying to find like where's the right where's the right fit. It was really kind of I liked all of those things, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then I did my PhD at Georgetown in political theory.
Mm.
Absolutely loved that. And a lot of it was about the things that I'm really passionate about, which is business and society, right? How do we make a society that creates well being for people and flourishing and all of that? So I loved that. Then got out of that, right? Finished my degree program, was looking for a job. Very hard to find academic jobs, which probably you're familiar with. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So I actually did some postdocs. I taught some different things. And then at one of my postdocs, I had a colleague who was like, because he knew I was struggling to find a full-time position. And he was like, well, have you ever thought of teaching business ethics? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, what? Tell me more. And so he was like, well, how about we teach a class together? And I was like, okay, like, doesn't hurt me any. So co-taught the semester, started to learn about what goes into this. And I was like, oh, this was all the stuff I studied in political theory, but just more focused on business. This is kind of all the same sort of thing. So I started to teach business ethics courses actually at the Springfield campus of the University of Illinois. And then through a series of friend of a friend of a friend, I got connected with Larry DeBrock, and he was like, we have this really big course and we need help on it. Would you help? And I was like, sure, tell me more. So then I started to help out with Business 101 and then eventually took it over when he retired in 2020. So it's been a crazy ride. I would have never guessed, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I didn't really set out with that in mind, but it's a perfect fit because I'm so passionate about how students think about the world around them, how they think about business, how they think about their vocation and their place in all of that. Like I think that's really vital. And so for that, it's a perfect fit, but certainly isn't what I expected. I often tell my students, your career path may not look exactly as linear as you
Mm,
imagine,
for
right?
sure.
Especially in this day and age, right? You might
Yes.
try a bunch of things and you might have to figure out what doesn't work before you figure out what does. So, yeah, it's taken some time.
So how has it changed you? Because I imagine as someone who was on a path of thinking about history and then political science and now business and business ethics. I mean, in the same way that you opened the door to the world of business to students, that door has been opened to you as a professor. So how
Oh,
does it change the way you look at business?
that's a really great question. I think what it has opened for me is really thinking much more about the practical application of all of this, right? I remember when I started working with 101 and we do a ton with right thinking all about ethics and what is business and all of those things, but we also do really practical like how are you going to write a resume? How do you network with someone? How do you introduce yourself? How do you give a pitch? Those were things that I never like, were never on my radar to teach.
Mm. And these are
That
real
it,
life skills.
yeah, but that I've actually become really passionate about because they can make the total difference for a student, what their
Sure.
resume looks like, whether or not they feel confident introducing themselves to someone they don't know, how to network, all of those things. So I think being in business and teaching business has really given me the opportunity to think about like practical, just daily life skills that it takes to do really well in the business world. And I'm really excited to help students with those too, because I think they see like, oh, right, I need to learn how to do this. And I think, you know, I think since COVID, students are less comfortable with many of those skills, right?
True.
Than they had been in the past. So I feel like the need is only bigger to like, okay, how do you introduce yourself? How do you send a thank you email? How do you do
Mm,
some of these really basic things that are going to make a world of difference in their careers?
yeah, that's great. Now, let me ask you the question that everyone at every dinner party who meets you for the first time asks. So, what are you doing about AI in your course?
This that's there is there's the $1 million question. No, this is a great question. So I think many things. I think the first thing is we try to give clear expectations to students about like how to use it and when to use it. I think the second thing that we do actually in the client project that students do with
Hmm,
their companies, we ask them to use AI because there's research that shows that novice consultants really benefit from using AI. And of course, my freshman students are the most novice of consultants
yes.
in their project. So we actually guide them through like how to use it for brainstorming, for coming up with good suggestions and ideas. And it's a really powerful tool, especially for our freshmen, because they're struggling to kind of learn about these things in the first place. And AI is a really great tool for that. So we actually do a lot of scaffolding to show them how to use it. And what I find is that at the end, I get feedback from students who were like in one of two camps. I get students over here who are like, I'd just been using AI to copy paste. This was actually a really much more robust way of like using it as a thought partner. I hadn't ever done this before. This is great. So students over here, and then it has students over here who were like, I was afraid to use AI. I've been told not to use AI. And you gave me permission and showed me how to use AI. This was actually really helpful. So I get students who are kind of come in from very opposite ways. And I'm
Mm.
trying to show them a path forward where AI doesn't replace their thinking, but really supplements it and helps them know how to move forward, right? And give them ideas that they might not have on their own and then be able to advance those further.
So, less as a search engine and more as a collaborator.
Yes, I think that's where I mean, I honestly think that's where the real value
Yeah.
is, right? It and is as that thought partner, collaborator, idea generator to kind of wrestle with. But most of our students kind of stop at the copy paste
Of
moment, and that's
course.
not very helpful for them, right?
No.
And it also doesn't really help them, right, in the workplace add value, right? If a copy paste from AI is all that you can do at work, you might not be adding a lot of value, right? So, what we really want students to do is like, okay, how are you going to add value in a way that's distinct from AI? And I think that's
Right.
actually really important.
Well, Amy, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for spending this time
Sure.
with us. Really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And
Fantastic.
good luck to you. I think your students are very fortunate to have you.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it.
All right. We've been speaking with Aimee Barbeau, who is a teaching assistant professor at the Gies College of Business. This is part of our series on the faculty spotlight of Gies' best professors. Aimee is definitely one of them. Tune in for other episodes. This is John Bird with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.